I thought maybe we could start off by hearing you had a career in law, specifically patent law or IP, and now you have founded and own a CPG brand that's kind of been on a pretty fast growth curve. What was the transition from law to starting a small business?
I had always been interested in startups for some reason. When I was a lawyer doing intellectual property law, a lot of times we would work with giant corporations filing tons of patents on everything that they did. And then also every now and then we'd get a startup who'd come through. And when I would talk to the startup, they were so into their technology and their idea. And usually I'd be talking to like the CEO or the CFO, someone who's very high up in the organization, because that patent was so important to what they were doing. It just seemed like an exciting world to be in. And so as I was doing IP law, I was always kind of on the lookout for businesses that maybe I could buy, though I didn't have any money at the time, but I was still interested in that path or start. And so I think that that's why we ended up starting a business, because it was just the most capital unintensive option to do, low risk, at least in our case, because it didn't require that much money to start. And so just jumped into it.
That's awesome. Before we get into the origin story, I want to give a quick introduction. Brandon, along with his cousin, founded a company called Pristine Sprays, and they produce toilet paper spray that's an alternative to flushable wet wipes. And the product has been featured everywhere from Shark Tank to CNBC to Good Morning America. And so we're going to dig into what it takes to get a CPG or product off the ground, and then their experience scaling that business as well. So Brandon, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I guess, how did this idea come up when you're evaluating, okay, we're thinking about starting a business from scratch? Were you definitely going to do it with your cousin? And then how did kind of CPG as the space get dialed in?
I think, like many businesses, you'll hear people talk about start from a personal problem. And
Sure.
I had a personal problem. I enjoyed using wet wipes, and I had used them my whole life. I had just never quit from when I was a child. And I ran into the issue where I would go to work, and so it was kind of cumbersome and difficult to carry wipes to work. And where do you put them in your desk, and how do you take them to the bathroom? And also, I ended up having an allergic reaction to them, so I had to stop using wipes entirely, and I had no alternative. And so started thinking, basically, what could I do? Nothing was working. I tried, wetting paper towels in the sink, and that clogged plumbing at the office, and it's completely impractical for a number of reasons. So I started thinking about what is some alternative. And I thought, well, what if we put liquid in a spray bottle and make it so that it's cleansing and also moisturizing? It's got all the good properties and things that like a lotion or something that you put on your body would have, but you can use it with toilet paper. That was how the idea came up. And then I thought, I knew my cousin was interested in startups also, because we'd always kind of chat about, oh, that's a cool company or whatever when we were around each other. And then also I knew she had a lot of experience with wet wipes because she had 3 kids. And so I was able to talk to her about, what are the good brands? What are the brands you don't like? And what are ingredients that you like or don't like for your children? And that's really how the really more natural, eco-friendly component of our company started.
That's great. What was the process of refining the solution itself?
It was a very long process in hindsight. We started just with my cousin was very good with label reading. As a mom, she had really focused in on, here's no ingredients. At the time, the natural ingredient market was just really beginning. A lot of the huge brands that you see today that are more natural got their start in like the 2013-14 area. And so knowing what ingredients were starting to become problematic from an irritation standpoint or just something that you don't want on your skin, my cousin was very good at that. So we started by researching everything that we could possibly know about formulas, how much you should put of X, Y, or Z ingredient. Do you need to preserve it? How do you solubilize or emulsify it? All these terms that, we had to learn. And so I would say we spent 3 to 4 months just mixing stuff ourselves, and couldn't afford to go hire a chemist who could, charge $10, $15, $20,000 for a formulation. We kind of did it ourselves as much as possible. And then we got to a point where we thought we really need a formulator to look at this. we were able to find that through the first manufacturer that we ended up
Sure.
partnering with, which was also a huge challenge, getting in the door with the correct manufacturer.
Yeah. And I want to dig into that. Before you did, was this happening on like the kitchen counter or did you all set up like a lab in the garage? Or what did that look like?
It was all kitchen counter based. I mean, we had hairnets and gloves, and we were, boiling water. And I still have the list. In fact, it's listed in our patent, of all of the different formulas that we created. And it was just like 5 drops of this and 1 milliliter of that. And we would just literally make 25, 30 bottles, take them, test them on ourselves over the week, and write notes. I didn't like this. I liked the way this smelled. This didn't feel, good enough. And just complete trial and error with the like heavy focus of, we want this to be a super, as natural as possible and as non-irritating as possible, because we want people to really trust this product, and trust that it's going to be good for them and their skin, and if they choose to put on their children, that too.
Sure. So you run into a personal problem. You spend 3 to 4 months iterating on what exact solution should you at least start with. And I'm sure that formulator maybe refined it over time as well. What's the next step after that? Is it trying to go get a manufacturing run complete, or is it trying to sell it to friends and family?
It's so funny because a lot of times with business, I found, you ask questions yourself of like, when are we going to know when to go find a manufacturer, or like, when do we know when to increase our advertising spend to 15,000 a month or whatever. And I think a lot of times the answer comes to you and you don't have a choice. And that's what happened to us with manufacturing. We decided, well, we could manufacture this ourselves, because a lot of people actually do CPG products out of their kitchens. And so we tried to do one run on our own, and you don't have an appreciation for large numbers like 1,000. What does 1,000 mean? Until you try to actually bottle 1,000 bottles by yourself. And I think we were like 200 bottles in, and we said, nope, there's no possible way that we can scale a company and make any meaningful money if we're in the kitchen doing that. I mean, there's no way. And so it was kind of a realization that day that there's the only way forward in this industry is by getting a manufacturer. And that probably would be obvious to a lot of people, but my cousin and I happen to be very do-it-yourselfers, and we probably spend too much time trying to do things that we should hire someone to do. But that was a good early lesson, and you should be focusing on the things that you're good at and outsourcing or hiring for the things that you're not good at or not skilled at or don't know about.
Sure. How was the experience finding the right manufacturer? From other folks I've chatted with who've started CPG companies, the kind of like minimum order quantity problem rears its head. What was your experience?
That was a huge problem. Minimum order quantity was, everyone wants 5,000, 10,000 units. And we wanted to make 4 cents, and they wanted 5 to 10,000 units per cent. So we were looking at, 30 to 40,000 unit initial order. We had no idea about demand. Shelf life, is a limitation as well. And so finding the right manufacturer to say, hey, I believe in your product and your idea, I'll let you do 1,000 units, was a really long process. I would say other processes include whether they're going to let you keep your IP or not. So a lot of manufacturers in the CPG space, if you don't bring to them a complete formula, they might have a hand in your IP. And so whether you can take that formula elsewhere is a question that often comes up. And then pricing is a huge problem. We knew that we had a feel for what we might be able to price the product at based on what we saw wet wipes priced at. And so we knew that bumping up against certain numbers were going to make it impossible from a financial perspective. So finding that combination of low prices, but low minimum run, and also willing to let you have your IP. It was a long time. I think it took us probably a year and a half of trying and failing with manufacturers before finally we found one. They produced our first run. And then from when we started research and development to when we got our first run of 1,000 units, it was 2 full years, I think.
Wow. And had you quit your job by that point? Or were you still working?
I was still we were both still working. I quit my job 6 months after we got our first run, because I was having to start, we were starting to go to shows, and and dedicate a lot of time to it. So I felt like we needed to start really focusing. And I think my cousin quit her job about 6 months later.
Sure. And what was the cost of that initial run?
I want to say it was probably less than $5,000.
Okay.
So it was, and like we tried to do it as cheap as possible. We ordered the bottles, we ordered the sprayers. So we didn't want them to kind of bake in that price and upcharge it a little bit. So we ordered as much as we possibly could. And then they basically just provided us with the labor and the ingredients. But it was for in the grand scheme of things, a very low cost initial order.
Yeah, that's not too bad. And was this a stateside manufacturer?
Yes, it was.
Awesome.
And I don't know. I would say we got lucky there because back then, manufacturing everything in China was just becoming very in vogue, and it was almost kind of if you don't manufacture in China, you're not going the right direction. And we just did it for a simplicity standpoint. Lead times were 3 months for us, and if you were ordering from China, it was more like 6 months. And so forecasting inventory and negotiating abroad like that, being able to check, our internal quality control checks was a lot more difficult. And so I think that was more of a decision from simplicity than really a financial decision.
Sure. And once you get that first order back, what happens next?
That's the funny part, because it's like that's the first battle is just getting your product, and then you're like, well, I don't have to sell it. Um, and yeah, that's another huge challenge. The first time, we launched our website and we thought, orders were going to pour in,
Sure.
and I think it took 2 months before we sold a single bottle on our website. That's kind of what drove the impetus for Amazon, which we thought, okay, website they're not going to sell itself. And at the time, we didn't have any experience in running digital ads or email marketing or all the things that you need to be able to do in order if you're going to do e-commerce. That's what kind of drove the decision to say, okay, we need to try Amazon. Amazon seems like a big deal. At the time, this was like 2015, 16. It was a big deal, but not nearly what it is now. I mean, I think
Sure.
Prime had just become a big thing, and but people were still kind of, you could have lived without using Amazon, whereas I think it's a lot harder these days. But
For sure. And on the distribution channels nowadays, what's the breakdown between folks who come directly to the site, find you on Amazon? I don't know if you have any retail presence nowadays or distributors.
we're probably in 50 or so small independent retail outlets around the country. The vast majority of our business is Amazon, and it changes yearly. And I would say toward Amazon's favor, but I would say we started out at probably 60% Amazon, 40% website, and it's grown to probably 75% Amazon.
Oh, wow. And on the independent retailer side, was that them coming to you asking to carry the product, or do you have a sales team trying to grow the footprint?
Initially, it was us, going to what they call markets. There's three or four markets around the country, and they're seasonal. And you can either go and rent a showroom yourself, or you can partner with a showroom who kind of tries to sell your product for you. And that's a great way to kind of get into independent retailers of the same category or industry around the country. Now that e-commerce has grown so much, there's a lot of different solutions for that you don't really even have to go to shows. In fact, I think shows, they dipped for a while. I would say they became almost completely unpopular for a while. And now I think they're kind of coming back a little bit. They're starting back up. But there's these other e-commerce options, like Fair is the most popular one, I think, which is a place it's a wholesale market for independent retailers where they can go find your product. And so now the vast majority of our independent retailers find us through Fair.
Okay. And how do you balance the relationship with Amazon? Because on the one hand, they're driving a ton of volume. On the other hand, I imagine the take rate from them and maybe not owning the customer relationship impacts you to some degree.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting because I think in whatever industry you're in, you hear this kind of common wisdom. And the common wisdom at the time, this was probably 5 years ago, is you have to own your own customer and you need to fight Amazon at all costs. And, If you can drag your customers over from Amazon, you should, because they take a lot of money. And I've struggled with that a lot. And I think we fought Amazon for so long in terms of the time we spent. I would say when we first got started, we were spending 80% of our time on our website. And because websites time consuming, you have to plan out your monthly specials or deals and schedule all your emails and build your emails and do all the graphics. And you have to drive traffic too. So then you're talking, are you going to do meta ads? Are you partnering with influencers? So driving traffic to your website is a very time consuming and can be very costly. So we were spending 70 to 80% of our time on our website, but 80, or whatever I said, 60 to 70% of our sales were coming from Amazon. And there just came this moment of realization where we were like, why are we not just really leaning into Amazon? Because that's where we're just naturally growing on Amazon. What if we spent 70% of our time on Amazon? And I think that eventually became a good decision because we were able to grow with Amazon. Amazon started launching a lot more tools that made it very easy to partner with influencers, very easy to run your own ads in a much more profitable way than Meta was back then. And so, I think that's a recurring theme that seems to come up in a lot of the business things that we've done. It's just that there's common wisdom, but it doesn't always work for your brand or your case or your industry or whatever. And you kind of have to, or we've had to say, this isn't working for us. Let's do what's working for us and make that decision for us. And it might be contrary to what most people say you should do, but don't fight it.
And by lean into Amazon, what does that look like? Like, are they fulfilling the orders? It sounds like they have a number of different tools that you can leverage.
They are. So we got on with FBA, which is you can fulfill yourself or you can fulfill by Amazon. And so we did fulfill by Amazon from very early on. So they were frequently, they were the ones filling our order from the beginning. But by lean in, I think I meant just let's put a lot of time into developing our Amazon page, researching the keywords that people are searching for in our industry, making sure that all of our ads are targeting those keywords, making sure that we're always checking for competitors on Amazon, new competitors that we can target with our ads, using all their new beta tools. They come out with beta tools all the time that are devoted to helping sellers sell in some way. And so just making sure that we were giving the most time to the platform that was providing the most sales is how we shifted our thinking and tried to stop thinking of Amazon so much as the enemy and more just, that they're kind of an extension of our work first, because they do take a lot of fees, but at the same time, we're not having to be their packaging orders ourselves or hiring someone to package orders.
Sure.
If you consider the cost of postage now, their fulfillment costs are probably quite a bit less than if we were to factor in postage and packaging and someone to actually fulfill the order. It actually probably comes out less for Amazon to do that. It's kind of interesting though how your mindset shifts through the years once the situations change.
Yeah, I'm sure. How do you think through defensibility or competition? Because I know one thing, Amazon aside, is that nowadays there's so many copycat products that pop up as soon as something starts working. And I'm sure that happened with y'all as well.
Totally. And it's becoming more and more of a problem. I know I talk with a lot of e-commerce companies, and there are some that are just constantly fighting off copycats. And we have had copycats in the sense that there are products that do the same thing that we do pop up. They have different names, so they're not trying to directly copy our brand, but it's the same product. I think that to me, that's highlighted the vast importance of having a good brand, building your brand, because what a brand represents is trust. If you go buy a certain brand, you know what you're going to get, it's going to be consistent, and you know who the owners are, that you can trust them. And so that is something that a copycat can never take away from anybody, really. And so I think that now more than ever, creating a good, trustworthy brand is so important, because it sometimes is the only defense against copycats like that. Because even if you do have IP and patents and trademarks, That doesn't always necessarily mean that they're going to be enforced by how whoever is selling your product, in our case, Amazon. And it doesn't mean that even if they are enforced, that people are going to uh, abide by whatever that is. They can keep selling it, and then it's up to you to sue them, which I don't know many people want to get into lawsuits. So the only real defense you have is that people like and trust your product.
Sure. And was going on Shark Tank part of the actions that you were taking to build a brand, or were you actually going on there for the financing?
I think that it was probably a combination of marketing and brand awareness, and then also what we viewed as having an industry expert in a shark to help us. We asked for $50,000 for 25% of our company, and $50,000 is obviously a ton of money. But if we had needed $50,000, I think we probably could have raised it from friends and family, or putting in more money of our own. So it was mostly for us the view that Lori especially is an expert in CPG products, and so she's taken many CPG brands and made them explode. And so we thought, if we could just take this idea and get it to somebody who has all the contacts and the channels to sell this, it could really take off.
And did y'all see a decent lift from going on Shark Tank?
We did, yeah, we did. It was at the time, it was probably the first year that we really had started selling on Amazon and started getting some traction, but we were nowhere near where we needed to be to make this a functional business that could pay for ourselves. So Shark Tank was really, really big in just getting us out there enough, and also kind of validating in our mind the product and that it was a good idea, because that was the first time we had so many sales that you were going to get a good idea of whether people liked your product or not. And so
Sure.
that was the first time that we had a bunch of 5-star reviews flood in on Amazon, and we thought, okay, we thought people liked it, and we had reorders, but we didn't really have this sort of validation until Shark Tank. And then Shark Tank opened up other opportunities and with media.
Yeah. And fast forward a handful of years, how has the team evolved over time?
We have intentionally stayed very lean. My cousin and I have divided our responsibilities, and so we kind of have our own responsibilities. Um, Amazon is, I guess, technically part of our team, because a lot of, the vast majority of our orders get fulfilled with them. We do work with an Amazon consulting agency that basically just helps advise, helps do a lot of the inventory management and there's inevitably problems with your listing or whatever. We have tried a large handful of agencies, marketing agencies, PR agencies, sales agencies, and they have never worked out. And I'm not exactly sure why. It's another one of those things that I think they work for some people, but you have to kind of know your product and know your business and know that it's not working for you. But so we have had people work with us on all of those things, but right now it's just Amazon agency and both of us and Amazon.
That's awesome. On the working capital side of things, it sounds like you have an agency who's helping manage inventory at Amazon. And then do you have a line of credit that allows you to essentially like run up inventory on Amazon and then pay it down as sales come in? Or how do you think about managing that?
So in another instance of us maybe being non-traditional or going a non-traditional route, but from the very beginning, because we were bootstrapping and we didn't have investors and we didn't really have a lot of money to put in,
Sure.
we were highly focused on unit economics and finances from the very beginning. And as we kind of scaled up for things like Shark Tank, we saw really early on that working capital's really important and cash flow is really important during those high growth times,
Sure.
because like you said, if your PO is takes you 3 months to get, but you have to pay half up front for it, and then the PO gets bigger each time, like you run into a cash flow problem really fast. And so from that very early time, we started what we call a Pristine savings account. And so every time it came to pay our salaries, we pay quarterly, we would put away X% into a high interest banking account, to at least for a rainy day, essentially. And so thankfully now, I mean, with our inventory management's gotten a lot better because we've just been able to forecast demand a lot better. And so we can place more strategic POs where, we're getting product as it's running out and we're placing a PO for 4 months in advance. And so that portion of the working capital hasn't been a huge problem, but it's because we, didn't spend every dime and we saved. And that would be the total wrong advice for some people, or in some people's opinion. They would say, oh my gosh, why are you saving money? You should put that into growth. And then, that'll come back in the long term with reorders. And again, that could work for some people, but we just took a different path, I guess.
Sure. From a week to week or month to month basis, what are the numbers that you're tracking in the business?
So that's another highly dependent on our approach of, hey, we're bootstrapping, we want to be profitable, we don't want to have to go ask, get money and give away equity. And so, but because of trying to be profitable, that drives kind of the numbers that I'm looking at monthly. And so I look at definitely the financial statements. I look at the income statement almost every day. So it's probably, a lot of people probably say that's too much, and probably it is, but I just want to have a feel, an almost intuitive feel for, is this month going well or is it not going well? And, what's high this month and why is that high? And can we reduce it next month? And so trying to get a feel for where we are on the income statement is really important. And then the other big thing for us is return on ad spend, or they call it ACOS on Amazon, but just how much are we getting back for every dollar we spend? And so from very early on, because we wanted to operate our ads profitably, we had to work out, what is the average cost of every order? What's the average revenue on every order? And then what's our average amount of acquiring a new customer, so that we could work out, where do we need to be? And it turned out we needed to be like, for every $1 we spent, we needed $4 back based on ad costs and cost of goods and everything. And so that's kind of if we're not averaging, around a 3 to a 4 on Amazon, I'm, going into the ads and seeing what's up. So that's like very profit-based metrics review that I'm looking at.
That makes sense. Given your experience here, if you're chatting with someone thinking about investing or buying a CPG company, what would your advice be?
I would say, it's weird because now I look back and I say, well, I didn't know anything about CPG. Although if I'm looking for a new business to buy, I'm kind of looking at things like I somewhat know about.
Sure.
But I'm always interested in new fields. And so I don't think that it's really necessary to be looking for something that you know about. I mean, I think if you're interested in a field, that's maybe a little bit more important than even knowing about it, because you can learn an industry. But whether you're interested in it, that's what's going to make it fun on Saturday to be doing your books or talking to customers or whatever it is. That interest in what you're doing, I think, really comes across to really everybody, investors, customers, and you're just going to live a happier life. So I would say, look for something you're interested in. And then, have confidence in yourself. Don't be afraid to try new things. Take advice from people, but at the same time, remember that, that advice is not always going to be working for your business or your financial situation or whatever. And so if something doesn't feel right, feel free to trust be confident in yourself and trust that what you're doing or what your decisions are good for your business.
Yep. Looking back over the years, what would you say is the biggest surprise? I mean, it sounds like you invalidated some conventional wisdom and found a better path for Pristine sprays, but I don't know if there's anything else.
I would say, we thought it was going to be an immediate rocket ship. We thought, oh my gosh, when we started in 2015, we have 5 months to develop this product because someone's going to take this idea and it's going to explode and it's going to be everywhere. And it just didn't happen that way. It's grown, and I think that we've shown at this point that it's going to be a successful idea, but it's far from like the hockey stick that everyone always refers to.
Sure.
And at times, I think that was discouraging. We thought, well, why is our idea not good, or is this not working? And I think, again, it's just every business has a different trajectory. And that did surprise me that it didn't take off. But there's good parts and silver linings to that too. Like it allowed us to, position ourselves as the market leader. And so now if a big guy does get in, maybe we're a better acquisition target. It allowed us to learn the industry. It allowed us to do a lot of things, make a lot of mistakes without as big of consequences. If it had taken off like a hockey stick, maybe we would have made some huge financial mistakes that were, not recoverable. So silver lining, is probably better for us not knowing the industry, but I think everybody thinks that their idea is so good that it's going to explode. It's just not, it's not true always.
Yeah. I mean, you need to convince yourself to quit IP law.
Right.
So,
You got to drink the Kool-Aid for sure.
Right. Awesome. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story and chatting about CPG.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.